Okay, we'll start the class now. See, in this class, what we are going to do is we'll take up some important case studies related to contemporary subjects. Actually, in last 2-3 years question papers, if you analyze, you will find that definitely a few case studies have been inspired by current and contemporary affairs. So in last class also, accordingly, I uh, took about 3 case studies, which were quite good case studies, complex case studies, layered case studies, uh, particularly important from this year's exam point of view. So in this class also, again, I'm going to take up similarly another 3 case studies, which are quite important from this year's exam point of view. Definitely, if students go through these case studies seriously, they may find at least some themes, comparable themes in the actual exam paper also. So this is the case study. Now, before going to the questions and answers, before we discuss, I will read it out, because by reading only we can understand what is there in the case study and how we can reply. So the theme of this case study, central theme, is procurement decision and institutional credibility. So the case study reads like: you are heading a procurement committee, awarding a 2,500 crore contract for expansion of district hospitals. One of the shortlisted companies is owned by your former professional associate, with whom you share a long-standing relationship, though no financial interest. Media outlets publish investigative reports suggesting possible favoritism. Opposition leaders demand your recusal. Legally, there is no bar. So let us see. I mean, this is the important thing, that legally there is no bar on your participation since you have declared no financial conflict. Project is time sensitive, as delays may affect hospital construction schedules and healthcare access. If you step aside, the process may be delayed significantly. So delay is another significant issue in this whole, because there is urgency for this project. If you continue, even a fair decision may be questioned. So you must decide your course of action while ensuring transparency and efficiency. Now, if we see in this case study, conflict of interest, I mean, it's there, but it's not direct, I mean, conflict of interest. I mean, maximum we can say there is a perceived conflict of interest. Because the concerned officer has already declared that there is no financial dealing with the contractor. But I mean, if he recuses, then there is, and if the tendering is delayed, then there will be healthcare system in the district will be affected. So I mean, this is the thing. So now let us see what are the questions asked. Now, first question is: distinguish between legality and ethical propriety in public office. So what are the legal issues and what are the ethical issues, and how they compare with each other? Second question: how does perception influence institutional legitimacy? Because here the issue is a perceived conflict of interest. What safeguards could minimize bias and suspicion? And fourth question: what decision would you take and justify? So now let us see what answers I have proposed, model answers. Let us go through that. Now, first question was, if we see, distinguish between legality and ethical propriety in public office. So let us answer that. Legality means compliance with statutory procurement rules. Since I have no financial interest, my participation may be legally valid. This is important, because Financial interest, I have clearly declared that I have no financial interest. So procedurally and legally, participation may be valid. However, ethical propriety in public office demands a higher standard. So basically what we understand, ethical standard should be higher than legal standard. The principle of natural justice, nemo judex in causa sua, which means nobody should be judge in his own cause. No one should be judge in his own cause. So this is very important principle of natural justice. This principle requires not only absence of actual bias, but also absence of reasonable apprehension of bias. So even though here actual bias is not there or actual conflict of interest is not there, but definitely there is reasonable apprehension of conflict of interest or bias is there. I keep on telling that we should quote the relevant Supreme Court cases also, if remember and if required. So here the relevant case is A.R. Kripak versus Union of India, 1969. In that case, Supreme Court held that even likelihood of bias can invalidate administrative action. So what the conclusion is that legality does not automatically ensure ethical legitimacy. Ethical legitimacy is at higher standard than legal legitimacy. So that's what we should understand. Now we'll go to second question. Now, if you remember, second question is, how does perception influence institutional legitimacy? So now let us go to this question. Influence by perception on institutional legitimacy. Public office is a fiduciary responsibility. This is office of trust, rooted in the idea that authority is held in trust for citizens. Under Article 14 and rule of law proposed by, the main proponent was A.V. Dicey, fairness must not only be done, but be seen to be done. So one should not only be fair, but also appear to be fair. So fairness should be seen to be done. And particularly in high value public procurement, perception of favoritism can damage institutional credibility even if the process is objectively fair. Now we'll go to third question. Third question, if we see, what safeguards could minimize bias and suspicion? So let us see what safeguards I have proposed. Safeguards. Safeguards include formal written disclosure of prior association, recording such disclosure in official minutes, transparent scoring criteria of different bidders, digital documentation of evaluation, maybe video recording should be done, independent observers should be there, and post-award audit as per CVC guidelines on conflict of interest also can be ensured. So these are the safeguards. So keeping these things in mind, what course of action I will suggest? Now let us see in fourth question. Decision. I would voluntarily recuse myself through a written order, delegating authority to a neutral senior officer and ensure continuity to avoid delay. So first thing, I will recuse, delegate it to another senior officer. But since delay will affect the healthcare system in the district, so just to avoid the delay, I will ensure continuity with the senior officer. So though legally permissible, recusal upholds institutional integrity, protects public trust, and strengthens the credibility of the healthcare expansion project. So this completes the first case study, which I wanted to discuss today. Now let us go to second one. This case study relates to illegal mining, political funding, and administrative independence. You are district magistrate of a district rich in minor minerals. A recent posted police officer has intensified enforcement against illegal mining, seizing vehicles and registering cases against influential contractors. A senior cabinet minister pressures you to recommend transfer of the officer. This is a significant fact in the case study, arguing that his actions are disrupting local economy. You are aware that illegal mining networks have deep political connections and contribute to electoral financing. At the same time, strict enforcement has slowed down construction activities. So this is again an important impact and generated complaints from small contractors. If you recommend transfer, enforcement credibility collapses and also demoralization will take place. If you refuse, you may face political isolation or premature transfer. So now you have to decide the response. Now this kind of thematic case studies where political pressure is there and something wrong or unethical is asked to be done, usually every year it comes. Now let us see what are the questions. What ethical principles are threatened in case of a regulatory capture? Because here regulatory capture has been shown. How should a civil servant respond to informal political pressure? Third, what institutional consideration should guide your decision? Fourth, what course of action would you adopt and why? So now let us go to first question. What ethical principles are threatened in case of regulatory capture? So here, this case reflects regulatory capture, where enforcement risks being influenced by political economic interests. The principles threatened here are integrity, impartiality, rule of law, and constitutional morality. Under Article 14, law must apply equally regardless of political influence. Illegal mining also violates public trust doctrine, recognized in another very important Supreme Court case, MC Mehta versus Kamal Nath, which holds that natural resources are held in trust for public. Allowing political funding considerations to dictate enforcement would erode fiduciary responsibility of the state. So this is the first question. Now let us see what was the second question. How should a civil servant respond to informal political pressure? This is a very good question. Usually we should know, or any applicant should know the answer of this question. So now let us see what can be the answer for this. How a civil servant should respond to informal political pressure. Responding to an informal political pressure. Under All India Service Conduct Rules 1968, integrity and devotion to duty are paramount. Then another Supreme Court case, very key Supreme Court case, TSR Subramaniam versus Union of India. Administrative independence must be protected from arbitrary interference. I would respectfully explain that enforcement is based on law, environmental impact, and revenue protection, not personal targeting. So this is the only way out. You have to very politely and respectfully explain to the concerned political leader that you are doing as per law and there's nothing personal targeting, or you are doing actually in the interest of the district. Now what is the third question? Institutional consideration. Let us see the question. Question was, what institutional consideration should guide your decision? So now the answer, what institutional consideration should guide the decision? Frequent transfers under pressure weaken morale and deterrence. So weakening of morale is one, this thing, and deterrence also. Institutional stability strengthens governance. Concerns about economic disruption, because there are allegations that economically construction activities has disrupted. So economic disruption should be addressed through lawful mineral supply mechanisms. What can be they? And technology-based monitoring. For example, e-permits, GPS tracking, or even video cameras can be installed in the mining area. Vehicles can be tracked properly. Online system can be made for booking, so that the construction activity which is alleged to be slowed down, that can be avoided. Now, fourth thing is what course of action will be suggested. Now, let us see that. Course of action. I would decline arbitrary transfer record regions formally and review enforcement to ensure proportionality. Even if personal transfer risks exist, upholding rule-based governance protects environmental sustainability, institutional integrity, and long-term public trust. Constitutional duty must prevail over political convenience. So this is the course of action suggested. Now let us see the third case study which I am going to take up today. Now this is also a very important case study and inspired by current affairs, recruitment examination leak and collective fairness. Because usually some or the other news comes up that in some or the other state, some leakage of question papers have taken place. So this kind of case study is also expected in actual exam. So now let us go through the content. You are commissioner of a state recruitment board conducting an examination for 8 lakh candidates. So number of candidates are quite large actually. It should be a very big state. A few hours before the exam, credible intelligence confirms that question paper has been leaked in 2 districts through a coaching network. Evidence suggests limited geographic spread, but it is impossible to determine exact benefits. So this is again very, very critical information, that even though the geographic spread is limited, but it's very difficult to determine who are the exact beneficiary and what is the extent of effect. Cancelling entire examination would impose hardship on lakhs of candidates. Obviously, again, re-examination has to be conducted and cost crores of rupees, because again, the question papers have to be devised, whole logistics have to be managed. All those problems will be there. Restricting cancellation to affected districts may trigger litigation, alleging unequal treatment. So this is again another problem. Political leadership advises minimizing disruption. Social media outrage is growing. You must decide within hours whether to proceed or partially cancel or fully cancel the exam. So even though case study is simple, but the answers and the situation is quite complex. Now let us see what are the questions. How should fairness be defined under uncertainty? Now here the things are uncertain because we don't know the extent of damage or extent of effect by the paper leakage. So how fairness can be ensured in that kind of uncertainty? Then is collective inconvenience justified to protect integrity? Now this again another very important question, because if we cancel the exam, there will be collective inconvenience, whether it can be justified for protecting the integrity of the examination. What immediate and long-term safeguards are necessary? And what decisions would you take and how would you defend it? So now let us go to first question, that is, how should fairness be defined under uncertainty? Fairness under uncertainty. Fairness in public recruitment requires equal opportunity under identical conditions, flowing from Articles 14 and 16. So, see, besides Supreme Court cases, constitutional morality demands that we need to quote relevant constitutional articles also. So here 14 and 16 are quite important articles. So that's what it has been quoted. Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi case and held that state action must not be arbitrary. Further, there is very, very relevant case, Union of India versus Rajesh PU. In this court observed that if the sanctity of an examination is compromised and beneficiaries cannot be clearly identified, which is the case actually here, cancellation of that exam may be justified. So this was already decided in Union of India versus Rajesh case. Under uncertainty, fairness means preserving competitive parity and not merely following the procedure. So this is the first question. Now we'll go to second question. Now second question, first let us read the question again. Is collective inconvenience justified to protect integrity? Now let us see what can be the answer. Though cancellation would inconvenience lakhs of candidates, because there are numbers are quite high, 8 lakh candidates are there. Recruitment integrity is foundational to constitutional government. As per Rawls' principle of fair equality of opportunity and rule of law of evidency, public employment must be based on merit. Applying doctrine of proportionality, cancellation, though burdensome, is the least harmful option to restore fairness when contamination cannot be isolated. Justice must not only be done, but also seen to be done. So this is the answer as far as collective inconvenience versus integrity is concerned. Now let us see what was the third question. What immediate and long-term safeguards are necessary? So let us see what can be the answer. Immediately, I would secure evidence. To what extent, who has done it, how it was done, what is the extent. Involve cybercrime agencies and communicate whole thing transparently. In long-term case or reforms, include encrypted digital transmission, randomized question banks, biometric verification, GPS tracked logistics, and strict prosecution. Because that is also required, because unless there is a deterrence, these things can be repeated again and again. So what will be the final decision or conclusion of this case? So what is the decision? I would cancel the entire examination and reschedule promptly, because we cannot wait for indefinitely, but to the, earliest possible schedule has to be put. Though difficult, it protects constitutional equality, institutional credibility, and long-term public trust in merit-based recruitment. So basically, if we see, these are quite relevant case studies, which I wanted to discuss. These are important not only from this year's exam point of view, but these are evergreen kind of case studies, because these kind of subjects always keep on coming, regenerating, refurbishing, whichever period we see. So, but mostly exact wording may not be the same, but at least themes of these case studies may be there in actual exam also. So this is what I wanted to say today. I thank all the participants who have joined today. We'll meet in the next class with some other case studies or topics. Thank you.